Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Office Hours podcast. This is the episode 49, and in this one, we had a chance to talk about managers, project managers, product managers, people managers, what sort of qualities, I guess, you should have for that role, and why it is so strange to see so few young people occupying the roles in management. Usually it's reserved for somebody a little bit older with a little bit more experience, and we kind of try to explore why that is. And in the second half of our conversation, we chatted a bit about React and some things about React, how to hire senior people for React, what type of questions you would ask, sort of as a continuation of our previous conversation. So if any of those things are to your interest, please stick around and check it out. Thanks and have a great day. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the episode 49 of the Office Hours podcast. Today, we are happy to welcome back Mo, and we're going to continue the conversation from before and see where it takes us. Take it away, Mo.
How you doing, Vasily?
Hot, very hot still, but that's fine. But, if we do it for way too long, I'll probably melt. So this one is hopefully not going to be super long one, but we'll see how it goes.
We'll see, we'll see,
How
we'll
about
see. I
yourself?
mean,
Yeah.
I'm I'm good. I'm a bit like starting to realize like the summer is is rounding up because like the temperatures are dropping here
Mm-hmm.
and eh, but I'm just trying to like take stocks of what I did with my summer. I'm not sure if I used it very well, but I think I did my best. We'll see. We'll see, but maybe I'm going to make up for it in the fall. Please do something before it gets really cold again. Do
Yeah.
more things.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I've been good aside from this, and I've been up to a few things. I wanted to talk to you about some of them today. One of it is I met someone recently. He who works in our industry for sure, and he was sharing his career progression with me, and he told me about how like he joined the company about like a year and a half ago as an intermediate backend dev. I'm full stack dev, but before he joined the company, he has had like a series of like you know how like some companies you're senior, in some companies you're intermediate. So like he had all these like experiences, and then he joined this particular company as like an intermediate dev. And within like a year and a half, he currently is like a engineering manager.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, very impressive. And I was thinking to myself like when he was sharing his experience and how he actually got to this place, and I was starting to think to myself, like, these positions in like um management, I mean, from my point of view, it looks very much like something that you can actually learn to do. Like, you don't need to have 20 years of experience to have this position. Ideally, but it seems like in our industry, you need gray hair as part of the requirements to have these roles, And I was just wondering, like, what do you think about this?
Hmm. Well, I mean, in terms of gray hair, I'm like slowly starting to get there a little bit. So if that's the only requirement, I already
Yeah.
qualify.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to 20 years of experience, I think it's always helpful because ultimately, so for an engineering manager, you essentially talking to engineers all the time on one end and talking to everybody else on the other. So you are the gateway, right? And you have to be able to speak both languages. So having
Mhm,
engineering background, it helps just because you're familiar with the language. Because usually the biggest sort of communication gap is like whenever engineers explain things, they explain it from like an engineering point of view,
mhm.
which is understandable to other engineers perfectly or almost perfectly, but to somebody who's not an engineer, they would probably hear stuff differently. and not get exactly what was being said, or like they will have other outcomes from that. Like, I don't know, somebody says, hey, can we do this, and you would say, yes, we can do this, but in order to do this we have to do, and you start doing like all the engineering things that are required, and that other person listens to all of that, and to him the impression is they can't do it because he just listed out like a laundry list of things, so it's like it's a non-starter, right? But for you it's like, yeah, there's this trivial thing and that trivial thing, and once we have all of them out of the way, then we can do the thing you're asking for. So, but the outcome of that conversation, you come away from it thinking like, oh yeah, I totally told them that we can do it, and the other person comes out of it and says, yeah, they totally can do it, or something. Like, I mean, it's a contrived example, but you kind of understand what I'm saying, right? So for a manager's role, one big part is to do the translation, right? To kind of cut off all of the fluff that is not really relevant, and actually translate it into the terms, so that the original intent is conveyed properly. And for that, having some experience is nice. And like, yeah.
Um, but so I mean, this is true, but I think in this role, from my point of view, also, um, I think there is like the engineering manager who does like, and then you have like the product teams. Like you have like the POs, the senior POs, whatever, like this in the product department. I think I'm just speaking from like the companies that I've been, and I feel like the role of the engineering manager mostly is like the the people who the team leads reports to. So like the team lead and like so for example, you have like in your team of devs, and like you have like your lead, and then you have like the manager who actually takes care of like the team leads for other teams. Like all the team leads report to him, and this is what I understand as this role. And in this role, I don't know if it is his responsibility to translate the product requirement or like
Yeah,
product
maybe not necessarily
decision.
translating products requirements, but I'm meaning, like, again, it's not always the case that you're gonna have everybody in that chain, and you have to have separate project manager and separate product manager and separate engineering managers. Like, that's a lot of managers. You normally want to minimize the amount of managers, because
Yeah, I mean,
with every
yeah,
extra link in that chain, there's extra friction and extra delays and extra things, right? So kind of keeping it minimized, it's nice. Um, so, different companies treat these roles differently, and, one man's
mm,
engineering manager is going to be other man's project manager or whatever. Like, it's really kind of hard to pin them down, but they are
yeah,
in the
yeah, yeah,
realm of, it's a semi-technical role because you need the understanding of both the product and the implementation of the product, right? And you're also the repository of knowledge, of technical knowledge and project knowledge about the thing that you're building, because ultimately everybody's going to be coming for that person whenever they have questions, right? So, or not even if you don't have the exact knowledge, you should be able to know the person to point to, right? So this is a coordination role. You're like the
yeah. I
hub,
mean,
effectively.
yeah.
And
But my question now is that do you in this type of so for example, I know like when it comes to part of what I know, like you learn in the software engineering is also like you learn like project management, you also learn like requirement gathering, like a requirement analysis and stuff like this. So I feel if you graduate or if you go to school, as a graduate, you probably would know have like this knowledge. The question now is like these roles, usually the people who occupy these positions in most of the companies that I know are usually people with like um they have to go from like being like dev to like so maybe 20-25 years, like people who have spent several years, like it's rare to see like young people like people
Mm,
30s and all, like in this type
Not
of
not
position. Another one,
necessarily. Like, I
this is
mean,
this is my question actually.
yeah,
Like, do these roles, do you think like there are certain roles in our industry, like in tech, that is gate gate kept,
gate
gate
kept.
guarded? Gate kept.
I don't think they are. I think it's just a matter of preferences and proclivities. Because I think the manager role, be it project, product, engineering, whatever, I think it's mostly requires people skills first, because you are arbiter of communication between people, right? So you have to be able to talk to people, and you have to be able to, keep everybody happy. Like, one of the aspects of their role is keeping everybody happy, right? Uh, and if you are very strongly focused on the engineering mindset, keeping people happy is going to be difficult, right? Because if you live in a world of concrete,
Hmm.
you're going to be telling a lot of stuff to people that they don't want to hear, right? You're
Hmm.
not going to be sugarcoating as much. You're not going to be like, cutting rough edges around things, because ultimately, a lot of the managerial jobs, they're also, to me at least, it feels like they're very political. Like, you have to navigate the internal structures within the company and all of the groups and cliques and areas of influence, and try to expand your area of influence, and try, like, it is a political game, right? And so if you are not enjoying that type of work, even if your engineering chops are pretty solid, you're just not gonna like it there as much, I feel. And in my personal experience, I'm kind of trying to go there, but I can't say that, like, I don't really feel too comfortable doing it. It's just not something that gives me enjoyment, right? And also, the other thing is, like, a lot of times people get promoted to management, and then they are found lacking and gotten rid of. It's like, I could have been a decent engineer. Now people have all these other expectations of me that I can't deliver on, and okay, bye. So that happens too. So sometimes I almost think is like, do I want to go in this direction to kind of hit the limit of my competency, be found lacking, and promptly get fired or something like that? It's like, there's that risk too. I've seen that happen a bunch of times in different companies. So where was I
What would you
going
call?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
What would you? I'm gonna ask you. I just want to know, like, what would you call lacking in this type of role? Say, for example, I give you, I give you like a, say, for example, if you are a team lead and you have 5 devs that you are responsible for, maybe 3, 5 devs, or that you're responsible, but you're team lead. What would you call define as lacking in this type of?
Well, I think that in management, you're supposed to be sitting on a lot of information streams at once, and you have to keep everybody appraised of everything that's going on. Like, all the different stakeholders, they all need to know. And usually, just because you posted it in some Slack channel does not constitute them knowing. So you have to constantly be on top of everything and deliver that knowledge to all interested parties at all times. So if you're like missing out on doing that, they'll be like, well, he's managing the project, but I never hear anything from this guy. So what is he even doing, right? Because a lot of it is perceptual. Um, with engineers, it's somewhat easier, because you can. There are mostly reliable ways of gauging engineering output, but in terms of management output, it's like the very kind of determined way. It's like, is the project being completed on time and on budget? But
Mm.
those types of measurements, they're few and far between, because, like, the project starts, you can't measure for most part if it's getting delivered on budget and on time, and then when it's delivered, you say, like, did we hit the mark or not? And all the time in between, you really have to be, as the Russian saying goes, a plug in every barrel. you know,
A plug, a plug in everybody.
yeah.
Well, fair enough.
So
But
and that's a different type of skill and a different types of personality that goes with that. And I think that they are not completely orthogonal to the engineering mindset, but they're not exactly parallel with it. They're like occasionally they intersect, but mostly if you're good at communication and maneuvering politically and all that and keeping people happy and all that, engineering might be a little bit too, streamlined for you, and vice versa. Like if you're dealing to talking with machines all the time, talking to people is half as fun. So, and I think that's why, I guess younger people, you're saying like, oh, maybe there's like people are being prevented from getting into those roles younger. I think that probably if you're just straight out of college, again, college educates you on like technical skills. It's like, yes, you know how to do an estimation and you know how to gather requirements, but nobody really teaches you how to play long-term organizational game, right? That's more of a
Why
like you
not?
have to be, why not?
Yeah, so this is my question. You see, we're getting there because for me, looking at this person, and I think he's really doing well in his role. Um, I mean, it sounds like he is, but my question now is like, why not? Because product management, you can learn this. There are schools to learn product management. There are schools to learn, and the product manager is not exactly like a manager of people. He's a manager of the product. And there are people who work on the product. So you still have the team leads and like the team whatever structure to manage the team, and the PO is, or the whatever role there. So like there are different schools to learn this type of management. But when it comes to like roles like engineering manager or like software development manager or stuff like this, like you don't really have the accessibility like that to just like go into these roles. You have to
Yeah.
wait your turn.
Well, the reason for that, I think, is because the the level of responsibility in case of failure, like that makes a lot of difference. Like if you're a junior engineer, right? Like there's no problem being young and being a junior engineer. If you're a junior engineer and you've been given a task to change the button color from red to blue, and you messed it up and didn't do it, the consequence of failure is very small. But if you're a project manager and the entire project fails, the consequence of that failure is massive. So there's a lot of responsibility that is related to it. And usually younger people and taking up massive amounts of personal responsibility for things is not always how it plays out. I think you kind of
I'm not
have to
sure.
have a certain level of maturity to assume bigger and bigger responsibilities and managing multiple people and managing entire projects. So I think it's more of a natural consequence. If you get somebody who's young and who's like super conscientious and very diligent, I see no reason why they can't be
Exactly.
a manager
So
of
this
that
is it.
nature.
Exactly. So like I have met like people who we went to school together or like people in around my age who have these roles, and like it's not so different from being like an engineer yourself, because the only difference is like you are responsible for the features and like the product. Like you are the person, like you get to communicate with the client, as I'm speaking for POs right now. And you see like but I feel like the the word manager that comes after product product managers, they are not exactly managers. They're not like managers like like engineering manager or like team leads. They're not really managers. They're just like responsible for the product. But in terms of like managing people, I still I'm trying to understand why you need to have a certain level of years to be able to, why the people I know to have these roles have a certain level of years. And I'm not
Well,
saying
okay. Personally, how likely you are to trust and respect someone's judgment who just came out of college like yesterday?
this is a good point. Okay. Okay.
Like just
Yeah.
he may have all the skills, but you still, there's just natural dynamic in various collectives and organizations where you
Okay.
have to prove yourself first. You have to show everybody through your actions that you can actually do the thing. And
Okay.
then once you have that, then people have no problem with you. But if you come straight out of college and you're like, I'm the hottest shit here, I know everything and you guys don't, and you have to listen to me telling you what to do, everyone's like, who the hell is this guy? Get the hell out of here, right? So it's just a human dynamic. It has nothing to do with software engineering per se. I mean, if you go work
Okay.
at a construction job, it's going to be exactly the same dynamic. You have to be part of the collective, and they have to understand your skills, and that, like, you know, I think in these types of scenarios, people are naturally gonna be very feeling very good following somebody who they think knows better than them or knows more than them or highly skilled or something like that, right? It's just not a problem.
I see your point. Because like if I am talking to someone who, you know what, I see your point. Like I think maybe the age thing makes them more respectable in a way, and then you probably but I don't know if because sometimes, yeah, you know what? I see where you come from. I understand it now. It's just like I still feel maybe it could be a thing at some point where we have like more younger people have like fresh ideas on how to like actually relate to because I think if the age difference like nowadays we have like more younger people engineers like in the industries and like I feel like if we have people in these roles who are really like close in terms of like age demographics, I think it will be easy to relate with each other and like you can really understand how things are going. Like you'll be able to like communicate better. But for example, like if someone who is like let's say hypothetical scenario, like your manager is probably like about 55, 60, and you as an engineer, you're probably in like your late 20s or early 30s, and like you're trying to explain certain the things that you're going through or like something that you're struggling with. But they don't, you can't relate. Both of you are not on the same level of reasoning. Like it's just it's just the communication is not very, how do you say that? Like it's not very
I see what you mean. I think I see what you mean. Yeah.
yeah. So
So,
this
mm,
is what I'm thinking. So I guess
okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. So one thing that I want to say is I think in order to have good creative ideas about, the process of delivering a software project or whatever endeavor, right? You're saying, oh, like younger people with ideas. In order to have good ideas, you have to have a breadth of experiences, right? And if you're young, you just haven't accumulated them yet for most part. And so I'm just naturally more kind of cautious about, the quality of the ideas. I'm not saying that there couldn't be good ideas there, but I think for by and large, it's going to be, okay. And you have to teach people why those approaches not going to work, right? Which is again, that's how you get experience. Like you can try it and hit your head on a wall and realize like, okay, well, let's not do it this way next time.
exactly. Because even people with a lot of experience, they still make mistakes. So
Well, yeah, because there's I think that there is that competency thing where you think you know everything and then you understand you know nothing and then you understand you know something. But I think
yeah,
further to the end of that line, there becomes a point where, because okay, obtaining new experiences and new skills and learning new things, it's a very energy intensive process, right? Like it's not cheap, and your brain is
mhm,
very resistant to energy expenditures. And at some point in time, I think when you're older, you just be like, oh man, I just don't have the energy to. Like you kind of get stuck at certain level and you start making
yeah,
mistakes because everything else moves
mhm,
on and you're still
yeah,
operating using your old patterns, and eventually they kind of start diverging from the real world enough so that they start cause more problems than they solve. And that is just a consequence of kind of almost like giving up and be like, well, I've been in the industry for 40 years. I know everything there is to know. I don't need to learn anything else. I've arrived. And as soon as you stop growing, you start, growing
Yeah,
in the
very
opposite
true.
direction, right? So it's more
Yeah,
of a personal thing. I don't think that it's just that's how it is always. It's basically due to every person to, stay sharp and stay at the top of their game. But and again, we talked about it before where easy things are easy and hard things are hard. So once you hit the level where you're like consistently dealing with hard things, learning new skills to get even higher takes even more effort, right? And with time, as you age, you get less and less energy. So eventually it's just like, okay, well, you kind of like the energy demand versus energy capacity hit some sort of point where it stops working out, and that's it. That's kind of, broadly speaking, the beginning of the end of your professional career at that point in time. So
yeah, this is a very big topic that I would like to talk about because I noticed something, right? In in like the this is very unrelated from what I plan to discuss with you. So
we
so
can steer it back to whatever that was, but this is
yeah,
fun too.
but I'm just gonna put this out here. I noticed that sometimes in the because of the nature of like um what we do, I think sometimes do you feel when you start having like family and like you have like does this reduce your productivity? Say for example, you are able to put in several hours. I mean, there are obvious answers to this, but I wanted to just know your opinion. Say, for
Mhm.
example, you're able to put in like several hours, like to learn something new, to build stuff, to do like projects and stuff before having a family,
Yeah,
and
absolutely. I
and now
think
that
yeah,
now that you have a family and
you have other
other people,
priorities.
yeah, does this reduce your efficiency or like
I don't think it reduces your
how does it?
efficiency necessarily. I think it shrinks that space where you obtain new experiences. So you are basically you're as efficient utilizing the skills you already have, but you're having a tougher time developing new skills outside of like narrow domain at work where you like forced to develop those skills, but then you're spending work hours to learn them. And outside of that, you're focusing on your family, on all these other things, right? So you just don't do things just for the fun of it, because you have to spend your time elsewhere. And it's not like your skills that you currently have get worse. No. Well, I mean, they do get worse in the sense that the world keeps moving, right? So again, you start kind of falling back a little bit, and it's harder to catch up with it, right? It's just overall, if you spend 20 or like, I don't know, 18 hours a day doing all sorts of things versus you only spend 8 because 8 hours at work where you actually work on stuff, you just have fewer things that you can possibly explore in that time. So yeah, that's why it's really easy to learn these things when you're just like fresh out of college or even before, because you have literally all the time in the world. You're unburdened by almost anything.
Then it begs my question, right? So if the, I mean, this is controversial, but if if you have people who can prioritize the job to put like more time into what they do, and like they can make the job like their because they have nothing. I mean, not like they have nothing else, but they have more time to offer. Why don't we encourage them to take more bigger roles in the organization?
I think we don't
And
have to
like,
encourage them. They just end up in those roles eventually. If they are motivated, single thing, right, is improving their skills, they're just naturally gonna climb that ladder. I don't think that it has to happen. It just happens on its own.
that ladder is very long in most companies.
Yeah.
You know, the ladder to the ladder is quite long. But anyway, I guess this is very at the end of the day, it's going to be a thing for like maybe depending on the culture of the company or like depending on the people as well. I was just trying to understand why some roles are like, you know, based on my conversation with this person, I was trying to understand like why it's not a common thing to find young people in this type of positions in many companies. But aside from this, there is something else I wanted to talk to you about. This is a um, so um, also we were having like I remember one time we were talking about like what makes a senior dev, and we were talking about like the understanding of like system architecture, like things aside from like just like coding itself. And I was curious to understand like right now I believe you have like you're in a position to um where you are able to vet certain people on your team that they're like their level and stuff. When you are looking for a senior React dev, what are the kind of skills that you're looking for?
Hmm. That's like a whole big conversation. It feels. It kind of continues a little bit what we talked in the previous one. It's like how do you get good devs, right?
Yeah, but this time, what are the exact? So, for example, for me, or yeah, I think some of the things that will probably be like you'll be looking at is probably in terms of like your understanding of like the architecture, your understanding of certain concepts, like maybe how well you can use the like some tools, some libraries, like some concepts, like to solve certain problems,
Right. Right.
and how you organize like the codes and all. But I know like in React, I don't know if there is a lot of room for like this type of architecture stuff, because like I don't know how well you can really express yourself like in terms of architecture in React. So that's why I'm curious to know
Right.
like when you're looking, if you see like someone's code right now and you want to say like, oh, I think this person must be really experienced. Like, what are the things you're looking for?
Yeah, I think looking at other people's code is a double-edged sword because I definitely have a bias for like the code that I didn't write doesn't look right, you know. And I think most people, a lot of people would have that because
Well, fair enough.
you're set in your ways, and
Mhm.
whenever you see code written differently, it annoys you, and it automatically, at least for me personally, it's like, oh man, what the heck is he doing, right? Um, I think that you have to be able to diagnose and optimize performance related issues because the bigger React applications, the more issues with performance you're going to have,
Mm.
right? And the ability to not make mistakes that will impact your performance down the line, which is a very kind of nebulous type of thing because like what is it really, right? And yeah, it's a hard question. I'm still not 100% sure, you know. And going off the conversation that we had is like you can ask technical questions, you can ask all these other questions. Does that really give you the full picture? No, not really. So, and in the 2 weeks that passed since we had that conversation, I haven't really came up with anything more sophisticated than that so far, right? Plus, we haven't been hiring, so I haven't had any opportunities to try different things in my interviews. So for now, I would probably have to leave it where
Yeah,
it is.
yeah, but in 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 code, really, like I understand, like if you didn't write it, maybe it's not good enough, but
Yeah.
at least like I know good code when I see it. You can see well written codes when you say it, you know. So if I'm looking at someone's code right now, I'm looking at how you organize like the code in terms of like when you say if it's front end, I'm looking at how you are organizing like your presentation to like the logic. I'm looking at how you are managing like your communication between like probably different components, like how, because there are many ways to do certain things and they could work, but there are just certain ways that are best practices or like their performance optimization like techniques. So like these are things that would probably impress me. Also like
Mm. Well, the thing
the
is,
organization of your code
you
also
know,
impressive. I like
yeah.
beautifully organized code.
Yes, yes. I mean, aesthetic. There's a lot of things to be said about aesthetic and how that relates to just overall quality of the code. But the funny thing is that I don't know specifically about React because it's not like you get to work on a super low level there. But if you look at all the lessons in game development, optimized code looks like hot garbage usually most of the time. It's like the least aesthetically pleasing thing because the goal is performance. So there are extremes where you can look at the code and be like, what the hell is going on here? It's like, yeah, it's there to be as fast as possible and it looks like complete ass, and that's fine. That's normal. I think overall, I would say that I would value simpler solutions in favor to complex ones, which is hard to achieve. It's today I've been doing a refactoring on some component. There was like a bug in a component, and the way that it was designed originally was very convoluted, like extremely convoluted. And after the refactor, I think I probably reduced the code by like, it's like a third now of what was there before, retaining functionality, right? So, I guess I'd rather hire somebody who can write the second variant rather than first, maybe. But
Yeah,
again, it was built under. You always have to remember that if you're not looking at some abstract toy example, but you're looking at production code in a project that's been around for a while, you have to always keep in mind that all of it was written with certain circumstances surrounding the time of writing and certain constraints. Right? You can't just abstractly look at it and be like, oh, that code is garbage. It's like, yeah, but it had to be this way because A, B, C, D, F, and G, right? Like, it's not like we set out to write crappy code, but it had to, it had to fill a certain weirdly shaped niche in order to do the thing that we needed it to do under the constraints that we had. So you can't just judge it on its own. And a lot of people, when that's why I'm saying reading the code, somebody else's code, is a double-edged sword, is because when you just like if you go on GitHub and you start reading someone's code, you have no idea about the kind of constraints that they were under when they were writing it. And you can be like, oh, this is clearly stupid. I would have done it much better. It's like, yeah, but you weren't there. And backseat driving, hindsight 2020 and all the expressions, right? They all apply there. It's like, fair enough. You could write it better under, some sort of greenhouse conditions where you're unperturbed and given all the time in the world. But that's usually not the circumstances in which these types of projects are written. So you kind of have to, temper your expectations a little bit there.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I see, I understand what you're saying, and I think like this is for sure, like in the general terms. But right now, say for example, maybe I'm not asking my question correctly. Say for example, if you ask someone to um how do you say that? Like I'm trying to find like a good example. Say for example, someone is you want to to build okay, so let's say you're building an application. My example will probably be in Angular, and I'll try to explain it. So like let's say you're building an application and you of course you can keep like your good answer. You know what? There is something that we were doing recently. I recently learned about subscriptions. You know, like not like recently, like we had a conversation about it
Yeah.
and I learned some new things, but it came to my mind now and I can use it as an example. So there are certain people who do like subscriptions to, let's say, an observable. I don't know if you have the same concept in React, but
I mean,
we have
you
like,
can build React applications with observables, but
oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, and if you subscribe to this, like usually the best thing to do to avoid like situations with like leaks or something is to unsubscribe from this kind of things.
Yeah.
And for every component, you can condition like the subscription and like unsubscribe. And sometimes you can use the subject. Say for example, you have a destroy subject to unsubscribe. So you can have like the RxJS functions to do like take until destroy something like this.
Yep.
In some cases, some people, if you're new to this kind of way of working, you probably might not understand this concept. Like you don't understand why you have to unsubscribe because on the UI, you don't see it as a problem. Your application works, but yeah, there is a problem here, you know?
Oh, I know.
So
I know exactly what you're
yeah,
talking about.
yeah. So like this type of like little things, like these kind of things, and also like if you have to explain um more things about like how to like, you know, sometimes you don't even need to subscribe to certain things. You can actually use the observable in your template with like maybe like a pipe, for example, to fetch the data and like um it is it is probably like cleaner like that to
Yeah.
avoid this type of situations. This kind of concepts you don't get it from like your day one on the job. Like
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
you
Absolutely.
probably learn this kind of things from like your experience
Yeah.
as you keep going. And for me, if I see something like this, I probably know like, oh yeah, this person is probably just like trying to, it's just, you know, you probably like getting into it or like you know your way around it. This type of things will give me like an idea of how you work. So this is what I'm trying to learn from you now,
Right.
like
I
in
see.
React
Yeah.
times. Like
I
what are some
think
things you see?
there's because in Angular, I think there's a lot of very well defined gotchas that you kind of have to be mindful of. And if you're a beginner, you probably wouldn't know. And if you're experienced, you probably would. Like, if I were interviewing an Angular development, I'd be like, hey, when would you use on push instead of polling in terms of
Hmm.
change detection strategy?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
Or something
exactly.
like that, right? Because
Hmm. Hmm.
normally you don't really, on a garden path, you don't really encounter uh, times where it's like, oh, by the way, you can do on push, blah blah blah. It's like, no, you just build the components. You just like, you have your inputs, you have your outputs, whatever. You have your observables, and you build the component, and it all works, right? And only once you start getting into, oh, my performance optimizations are necessary, and I have to do all this more fancy stuff, would you would start learning about it, right? But with React, like React is changing quite a bit recently, and they're still like backwards compatible with the old stuff. And now there's the new stuff and the new stuff, and it all of them have their own specifics about like all the little tripwires that you can hit when you're developing using it, and it's more difficult, I think, um, because it kind of feels like they're trying to make the developer like the DX, you know, the developer experience, they try to make it easier and they hide away all of the nasty bits that you're not really supposed to kind of trip over. But
Mm,
everybody eventually trips over those things regardless, right?
okay.
So, and because of how recent these things are, I don't know how many people actually like intimately know what is happening and why. And they're also much harder to comprehend, which is annoying to me because, you know, old React, like pre-hooks, was extremely easy to reason about. There was nothing really that complicated about it. You could understand exactly what it's doing at what point in time. And it was like you had a perfect mental model of what React was doing. And you can also have like a perfect mental model of what Redux is doing, right? And you apply the two together, and now you know you're off to the races because you know exactly what's going on at any given time. Now I find that it's much harder to do so because hooks are way less transparent as a mental model compared to non-hooks, right? So it's harder to understand. Like I remember a bunch of years back when I was building an application for Angular JS, I would literally go into the Angular source code to debug through like the life cycle to understand how it was working, right? Because again, Angular JS at the time, it was less conceptually transparent compared to React, but I haven't learned React until later. And I liked it immediately
Okay.
better because it's like, oh, I understand exactly what's going on here, and it's much harder to understand what's going on
Yeah.
there, right? And then another time I did the similar exercise with Angular, the new one, right? Which I think they formalize a lot of these concepts. Like you can access all of that stuff through various APIs, which makes it nice. But I still remember like debugging the lifecycle loop inside Angular to understand why certain things were happening. And I think with React right now, if I were to try to do that, it would be really hard to do, just because the hook implementation is it's way advanced, and I'm starting probably hitting that stage of my developer career where it's like, oh, fuck, I don't want to learn all that. It's just like I don't have the energy to learn all that. I don't want to
Yeah.
spend like 48 hours going through the rendering life cycle because now there's all the asynchronicity and threads and fibers and all that kind of stuff. It's just too many new things that I have to learn well in order to understand it to solve some tiny problem that I have. So it's
Yeah.
not even worth it, right? And yeah, it's I wouldn't know necessarily what questions to ask because I'm still only partially kind of understanding them myself, right? And I only have to get into the nitty gritty once it hits some weird edge case. Because usually, like, I have an intuition about a lot of things, and most of the time they're correct. But occasionally it's like, okay, well, it's actually time to sit down and actually understand how it works and what it does. Like, and it's like that for everything. Like, for instance, I've been trying to debug some CI pipelines in GitLab, and I kind of have an understanding of how they work, but something was happening, and I was like, okay, well, let's actually sit down and understand how it actually works in full detail, and then
Mhm.
figure out why, it's not doing the things I'm doing. And it was a very painful process because in order to do that, in order to test your hypotheses, you have to make commits and wait for the pipeline to run. And when it takes like 20 minutes, it's just a very
Yeah.
slow process. At least with
Yeah.
React, you press a button, the rendering cycle triggers, you
Yeah.
can kind of observe what's happening. But with CI, you know,
Yeah, but I think you should. Do you have like a way to trigger it locally? Like,
I looked into it, but you could, but then again, you have to figure out how to install it locally and configure it locally so it's actually replicable. So, which is like another massive task in itself. So, you know,
yeah, yeah. Anyway,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, I see because I'm starting to have like interest in like learning. I mean, I used to work with like React, like like not too long ago, but I didn't do too much with it. But now I'm starting to think about it, like like I want to see how it works because I'm starting to have like some interest in to compare how the template works. Like I think for some time also like I probably did some work for a little bit with like Vue, and yeah, I want to see. And this is why I'm asking all these questions. And maybe if I have a project, I could share with you. Like
yeah, yeah. It'd
I
be
would like
interesting to
to see,
see.
because I want to know how certain what is called best practices in React. Earlier this morning, I was watching um it was like a project video, one of those videos on YouTube where you watch someone build an application. And then I was watching this guy write the code. And I remember how JSX, like the old JSX functional programming thing works. Like you can have like several components in one file, and you you can write your logic within just next to the template, like next to the like. And I was just looking at it, and it felt very you can do this to me, like I'm just like, why? How do you know where the problem is when you're actually like trying to like debug or like
And
like figure
that's
things?
why I'm on a crusade of extracting business logic out of the UI, as it should be done. And I mean, Angular does it better because at least you have like your template is separate from the UI for
Yeah.
most part, but they still give you enough of the, you have your like attributes that attach behaviors to things. There's like all these different things where you kind
Yeah.
of can do strange things that are not as obvious. Um, at least with JSX, the complexity doesn't necessarily come from JSX itself, but rather the intermingling of logic and presentation. It's kind of bringing back the worst things of, PHP templates where you just, here's your
Mm,
SQL query, and immediately after you loop over the results and render them out as HTML, like all in the same chunk of code, right? Like just no separation whatsoever. And it worked
yeah.
too, right? Um, And I think now with the new iteration of React, they're trying to do these things with hooks that are even more sophisticated, but they're all like a weird trick, you know. Like once you understand how it actually works internally, you're like, ugh, this is kind of nasty. But what are you gonna do?
Yeah. You know, I remember now that we're talking about it, I remember what one of the things that he was doing. It was like duplicating components in a component, and he was saying something like, "Oh yeah, you see now you can have like um 5 components with like different props and like different data." And I was thinking to myself, like, do you have ng? So in Angular we have ng4, the
Yeah,
four
yeah, yeah,
directive. Like in React you have something like I think I don't remember anything I did with React because it wasn't like a
yeah,
long time that I used it for, but
yeah. No, in React you
just
just map over an array. It's much
you don't
easier.
have the four.
You don't need the for because you just have a map. You just have a collection of elements that you render in some spot. So uh,
Interesting.
you just do whatever map does. Again, with quirks, you can't just like map. I mean, you can, but if you're performance cautious, you have to do other things in order to make it better. And so once you start relying so much on linters to catch all of these obscure behaviors, you know that it's a complicated tool that you're using. Like if you don't have ESLint rules for React, you're gonna be just making so many dumb mistakes in there. That's just not even funny, right?
Oh God, I was looking at it this morning. I was like, oh man, you have to really pay attention to these things because you can really miss things and mess. But it's the beauty of it. Like I think, like when I was using it, I think it was fun for me because like it was the first um front end component like library I was able to use. But over the time, like I think I've come to appreciate like the whole like separation of concerns and like Angular, but I have interest in React these days.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I guess I will have more questions for you about
sure.
some of the things that I learned, and yeah, we can talk more about it. Anyway, that's about it. Like these are the things. I don't want to keep you too long before you melt, like you said. So I hope it's not too long. You're still intact, no?
No, it's
You're good,
still good. I mean, I feel it, but it would be nice to shut down all the
right?
really warm lights and everything and open the
Okay.
window. So
Okay.
yeah, it'd be fun.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. So
All
yeah,
right.
I guess
Yeah.
we can continue another time.
Yep, we'll continue another time. So thanks everyone for sticking with us through this. And I hope you found it interesting, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.